Hey folks, I wanted to do a real quick video on CT values, which is a lab value that comes out of COVID PCR tests. It's a piece of information that isn't really widely talked about when we're looking at PCR tests, because PCR tests are either positive or negative, and that's all they have to tell you. So essentially what the CT value is, it's called a cycle threshold, and it is an amplification of RNA or genes that, from an exponential standpoint, so 2, 4, 8, 16, 32, so on and so forth. And at the point at which it crosses the threshold, that number essentially gives you a very, very rough ballpark of the viral load in an individual. So what we're going to do is I'm going to throw out some information here real quick and provide all the citations below and let you do your own homework. So just to give you an idea of the amplification cycle, it goes from 0 to 40. And so from a numerical perspective of how many amplifications it's doing, we're looking at, so at a 20, it's 1,098,576. If you bump that up 8 to 28, it's 268,435,456. All right, we're going to go up 2 numbers to 30. So from 268 million, we're jumping up 2 digits to 1,073,741,824 amplifications. Now we're going to go all the way to the max. So we're at 1 billion at 30, and all the way up to 40 is 1 trillion 99,511,627,776. So from 28, which is ballpark infectious, a good infectious viral load, to the max of 40, you're looking at well over 1 trillion amplifications. Now you're probably like, what the hell does all this mean? So essentially, when you're looking at it, you want to say, here, this is a generic graph of what a COVID cycle looks like. So these 2 lines here are different gene threshold levels. As they run the cycles, so as the cycles continue to go up, the minute it crosses these lines, that's what is considered your threshold value or your CT value. What does that mean? So the further you are, the lower you are, the higher your, the easier it is for them to find your the viral DNA. So basically it means that you're sick. Okay, so when you're looking at it and you think, okay, so what does this mean? I look at my COVID results and it says just positive. Well, what does that mean? Well, you have to ask for your CT value of your lab result, because now everyone is different. We know that. You being sick at this level doesn't mean that you're not going to be sick at this level. What you have to do is you have to take it into consideration. So if they're telling me that between 28 and 32 you have a viral load in you that is contagious or not contagious, whatever, infectious, and that you have an opportunity to pass it on. But if you're getting all the way up to 40 and they're claiming that there's just dead fragments and dead pieces of COVID and that's all it's picking up, you're not infectious at all, and you probably won't need any treatment regimen whatsoever. And again, please understand, I'm not saying that this is the exact same thing for everybody. I'm just saying that this is what folks are saying. So the problem is that when you're getting your results, you're getting only a plus or a minus. You're only getting a positive or a negative. In fact, in an interview with Dr. Fauci, I found this interview online on YouTube with Dr. Fauci, and he basically stated, for all intents and purposes, that nurses, clinicians, doctors, the labs are not required to tell you the cycle threshold. All they have to do is tell you plus or minus. Why is it big deal? If you have a perfectly healthy family member at home and they tell you you're a positive, wouldn't you like to know just how infectious you are? The FDA uses 40 as its baseline. So at 40, you have virtually no live DNA there to culture. So you're relatively not you're basically not infectious. I mean, this is you can find that information all over the place. But they don't tell you that. So anyway, in a New York Times article, this was published back in August. Just going to throw some numbers. They did update the article in September, but it was originally published in August. One doctor states, I've been using one type of data, or we've been using one type of data for everything, and that is plus or minus. That's it, positive, negative. We are using that for clinical diagnosis, for public health and policy decision making. That's all they're using. There's a little bit more information out there that you can use. All right, when you go down further, it states, in three sets of testing data that included cycle thresholds compiled by officials in Massachusetts, New York, and Nevada, up to 90% of people testing positive carried barely any virus. 90% in this study group that they used in those three states. It goes on further. If you talks a little bit, these tests with thresholds so high may detect not just live virus, but also genetic fragments, leftovers from infections that pose no particular risk, akin to finding a hair in a room long after the person has left. This also kind of touches base on the idea of long haulers. There's a video that I'll post that describes long haulers. Essentially, what it's saying is that there are people testing positive for coronavirus up to 3 months afterwards. So if their job or their business or their school required that they have a negative test before they return, with these tests being so extremely sensitive, these long haulers may not get to return to normalcy. I can tell you this for a fact. My employer stopped doing sequential tests because of long haulers. Because you can, in fact, continuously test positive and have no signs, symptoms, anything in you other than dead fragments. Anyway, going on, it says here in this, this New York Times article, University of California virologist, any cycle threshold over 35 is too sensitive. I'm shocked that people would think that 40 could represent a positive. This one doctor continues to go on and says he would set the figure at 30 or even less. But again, the FDA's, their information is 40 or below. So remember the numbers from 30 to 40. We're talking about 1 billion times amplification to 1 trillion amplifications between 30 and 40. So they're blowing this thing up just to find fragments and calling it a positive. So anyway, so one of the things I want you to understand is I'm not telling anyone to not wear a mask. I'm not saying that this doesn't kill people. I'm not saying that it doesn't make people sick. What I'm saying is that you need to take the time, if you get a positive test, ask for the CT value and understand and know and be able to decipher what that information means to you and where you sit from a clinical or a health perspective. If you're completely and utterly asymptomatic, but yet you have a positive and your CT's in the upper 30s, you're most likely going to be fine. Again, I'm not your clinician. I'm not a doctor. I'm just telling you. I'm just trying to get you informed and let you do your own homework. I'm also saying that if you're sick, do the right thing. Wear a mask, socially distance, quarantine. Do what is expected of you. Don't be an ass, but also be informed. Understand just how sick you are. The whole idea of a PCR test, the whole intent of a PCR test is to determine the viral load. But they're not telling you that. They're not explaining that to you. It's not just, hey, this PCR tells me that I'm positive. Well, how the hell did it tell you it was positive? It told me you were positive because the cycle threshold fell within the established guidelines of the testing manufacturer, which the FDA dictates what those cycles are. Okay, so anyway, so do what you're told, but be informed. Understand and know that if you're living with someone who is immunocompromised, but you're sitting in the upper 30s, near 40, understand that you're probably really not that infectious. Ask the questions. Go out there, do your own homework, and figure this stuff out on your own, just like I did. All right, so I'm going to leave you with this. I know that for those folks on YouTube, or not YouTube, on Facebook, that I always leave you with stats. These stats are from the 4th and the 5th from the CDC. All right, let me pull my paper down here. All right, CDC cases, 20,732,404 cases. Deaths, 352,464. All right, 1.7 mortality, which basically is 98% survivability of COVID. That's 0.1% of the population that has died. 0.1. So 99.9% of the population is still alive. All right. If you look at it a little bit further, from the estimated population from July 2019, 6.3% of the population has actually had COVID. Some of the other basic information for school-age kids, cases, 10%, 10.6% of school-age kids have had COVID. That's it. 90% have not had it. And we're still considering not sending our kids back to school. When 90% have not established any cases. 65 and up, the age, 65 and up, still account for 81% of our deaths. So it still kills the old people, which is, this is not intended to be a vaccine, but this is why I say, I'm not getting the vaccine. I'm saving it for hopefully someone in a nursing home or an elderly person can get it. last but not least, everybody always, screams, hospital, hospital, hospital. Health and Human Services website on the 4th reported 17.74% of inpatient beds are occupied by COVID patients. So, yeah, it's still a lot, 20%, little less than 20%. That's still a lot. But at the same time, let's think about this. Let's backtrack and say, okay, so if we have these people that come in, severe shortness of breath, flu-like symptoms, pneumonia-like symptoms, they pop positive for COVID, but we're ignoring their CT value. They check the CT value, and let's just say we'll ballpark it and say that it's 37. Okay, so very little viral load. How do we treat this person? I'm not making any assumptions about how the hospital is going to treat this person. But do you think they're probably treating him as a COVID and not pneumonia? I don't know. If you come in with chest pain and you have a positive COVID test, how do they treat you? Do they do everything that they should, focusing 100% on the MI, the heart attack? Or do they hold things back or to try to evaluate and figure out why the hell this COVID is causing you to have chest pains? I don't know. And I'm not going to speculate that I do know. But when somebody dies of COVID, what was their CT value when they died? I don't know. Were they a long hauler? Did they have just basic fragments? Or did they actually have a decent viral load that probably could have killed them? This is information that they don't have to share with us. Dr. Fauci said it himself. Now, I will say this. Florida is the only state that I know currently, right now, that actually requires their labs, and I'll read it to you specifically right here, from the Florida Department of Health. Cycle threshold values and their reference ranges, and as applicable, must be reported by laboratories to the Florida Department of Health. So Florida is the only one that actually seemingly right now seems to give about these CT values and understands that they do carry some legitimate value. So at least one, so as everybody's screaming and crying about how Florida is opening up and they're doing this and they're doing that, well, maybe they're actually looking at the values and saying, these people are just, maybe they're just asymptomatic carriers that aren't really that infectious. They're, if they actually use this data, maybe they even drop their requirement. Maybe they took, the doctor's information from the New York Times and said, you know what? The CD, the FDA said 40. I'm gonna use mine and say 30. So anybody after 30, they'll be positive. Anything after that will be a negative. I don't know. I'm not going to speculate, but I'm just saying that at least Florida is taking the time to use that information. So to end this thing, listen, do your part. Wear your mask. Wash your hands. Do your own homework. Do the right thing. I mean, yeah, we all know it sucks. We all know that there is, in fact, 100% a political, there is some political motivation behind this. There's some tyrannical governors out there who are doing their own thing. And, I'm not trying to make this a political video, so I'm not going to, but just understand that the CT value it carries some weight. Do your homework. If you got people who are popping positive, tell them to ask their doctors to get the information from the lab so they at least have a general idea of just how infectious they are. And, do your own part. do your own thing. Figure it out. Take care. Be safe. Wear your mask.